There are people who, I can be meticulous and pencil out some artwork and then ink that artwork. But one of the joys of my particular pursuit in art is the improvised brush. Once again, I'm kind of coming back to those martial arts roots. So
Right.
instead of doing, bamboo forests and landscapes, I'll take that improvised brush to draw dragons or yokai. So yeah, if anyone wants, a special monster made for them, I'll be happy to do it, all in the spirit of the spooky season.
Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 466. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com. I'm excited to have back with us the internationally acclaimed and talented comic creator of Plugo Arts, Patrick Lugo. Patrick.
I'm pausing for applause, at least in my imagination.
And also friend of the show, see?
Yes. I mean, we've talked extensively. We've had tea together, at least on screen at the same time.
Right, yeah.
At some point, we'll be able to enjoy the aromas of a shared pot of tea at someday.
So you're here. You want to talk a little bit about your Undead KungFu Ghost Killer comic book?
Yes, UKGK for short, I like to call it.
I like that. Okay.
But yes, this is my new comic. I'm really excited about it. It kind of came to me in an inspiration. And the log line for it is basically right, kung fu versus vampires, or kung fu versus the undead, right? So the story in a nutshell, right? The story is when all hell breaks loose, not even the mightiest warrior can withstand the undead hordes, right? But there's one among them who spent his whole life training so that he could spend his afterlife battling, and that one person is the undead kung fu ghost killer.
That's awesome. Where did the inspiration of this come from?
Oh, I mean, you know me, Barney. I'm meticulous about delving into the folklore of martial arts, and that's been something that I've kind of built my brand around that with A Tiger's Tale volumes 1 and 2, which were you know decades in the making, right? Just based on the level of research that I engaged in to inform that comic series. And so UKGK is kind of a spin-off from that same method, right? So there is a specific um, Asian folk hero, a Taoist deity, um, who's called Zonghuai, and he is China's famous ghost hunter. So that little comic that you're scrolling past is my very quick secret origin of that folk tale, right? Zhong Kuai came to the city to train to be a palace guard. He was exceptionally talented as a martial artist, but he was also ugly. And so the vain prince rejected him because he didn't want such an ugly face, interfering with the beauty of his court,
Mm.
right? As a result, Zongkui was rejected, he was dejected, and he went off to die alone and unknown. But the gods kind of recognized that this was an honorable person. Even though he was rejected in life, they gave him a status in the afterlife as like the king of ghosts.
Oh, that's cool.
He was the person that would go out and rein ghosts in, and bring him, if any monsters escaped from the underworld, he went and grabbed them and brought them back. And so that's the story I'm trying to tell from the perspective of those people who, are running from monsters, and so it's like a kung fu take on a classic Monster Hunter.
Okay.
in comic form.
And so how long have you been working on this project then?
The seeds of this comic kind of were planted around 2020, and then they germinated for a while. And so I had done like a small experimental zine, we can call it, which I had produced mostly for friends, just to kind of see if they would be interested in the comic and in the fight choreography. And then I kind of set it aside to focus on producing a Tiger's Tale. But then this year, I just, like I've devoted so many years to the world building behind A Tiger's Tale that I would wanted to come back to that world, but with a project that was a little scaled down. So rather than producing another volume that's like 100+ pages, right, for each volume of Tiger's Tale, that's a lot of work. That's a large
Mm,
number of pages to create. So I wanted to do something that was more like a traditional comic, 20 some odd pages, 24 pages, something that I could bring to a local comic shop and sell it there. So it just seemed like with the Halloween season in full swing, having a ghost hunter, martial arts ghost hunter would kind of be the right mix. And then somewhere along the lines, I started really looking at like what I would title it, because Zonku is doesn't mean anything to anyone who doesn't know the Chinese origins of that name.
right.
And then so that's when I started really thinking about, oh, this guy it has to be a kung fu character, oh, the undead. And then little by little, I kind of was playing around with different, at one point he was called the ugly faced ghost killer. And I liked having ghost and face and killer in the title, but it just didn't really have the punch that
Right.
UKGK ultimately delivers.
Yeah, I like that. UKGK. That sounds really that there's a good cadence to that.
Yeah, I think so. And I played around with the letter forms, and I think it'll make a fun logo, a fun T-shirt. And then also, if you look right, no, where is it? There, right down there, right? The URL for this project is simply ukgk.site. See that?
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so, just in terms, one of my problems, you've seen this with me, Barney, that sometimes I could be a little too clever with my titles. So I'm telling people to go visit a tigerstail.com, but then I have to make sure to let them know that we're talking about a story and not an animal's anatomy.
Right.
So distilling it down to something that's really easy to say, ukgk.site, that was kind of like a personal accomplishment that I'm a little proud of. I might get one more backer just for the ease of that URL.
And so talk to us a little bit about what you have in the like the reward tiers that we're looking at.
Well, first is going to be the comic, right? You can
Right.
get it as a digital comic, and then you can get it as a traditional floppy, saddle stitched comic that'll come bagged and boarded. I've got a special variant cover that I'm eager to announce, but my announcement for that will come a little bit later. But I'll say that it's artwork in keeping with the tradition of Tiger's Tail. The variant cover is going to be created by one of the Kung Fu masters that I have a privilege of knowing. So,
Okay.
once again, it's just like part of this whole project. The nature of this project is like the martial arts deep cuts that are hidden throughout the book.
Okay.
So I'll have that. Then I'll make a blank cover sketch variant where the whole conceit is that since this is a monster hunter, and since the monsters of the Asian continent are very unique, I'll draw one of these crazy Yao Guai, they're called. People might recognize the term from the Japanese translation, which is yokai. Um, but these are monsters that are not your typical werewolf or wolf or vampire. They're much more interesting in their design.
Hmm.
So if folks want to have one of those monsters adorn the cover, I'll do that artwork for them. And
And so I want to point out for our listeners out there that, I mean, you are an award-winning artist, by the way. And the comic book itself is $13. But for $25, you get the sketch cover, essentially saying you get unique artwork by Patrick Lugo for $12.
yeah, totally original piece, because one of the things I love to do is I love to film the process of doing these kinds of brush paintings. There are people who, I can be meticulous and pencil out some artwork and then ink that artwork. But one of the joys of my particular pursuit in art is the improvised brush. Once again, I'm kind of coming back to those martial arts roots. So
Right.
instead of doing, bamboo forests and landscapes, I'll take that improvised brush to draw dragons or yokai. So yeah, if anyone wants, a special monster made for them, I'll be happy to do it, all in the spirit of the spooky season.
Well, hey there. If you're enjoying our podcast, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep this show going. We love hearing from you, so any feedback is welcome. And thank you for being a part of our podcast family and for all your support. It truly means a lot to us. Right. That's a great deal. And then you also have a digital catch-up kit, which involves obviously the UKGK and also a Tiger's Tail graphic novel, volumes 1 and
Yes.
2.
Yes, because this is the thing, right? Like it's taking place in the same like Tiger's Tail universe, the world of
Okay, all right.
Kangfu that I'd like to describe it as. And so you've read A Tiger's Tale volumes 1 and 2, and so you kind of know how the story is it's like a much bigger picture, right? Because we're dealing with like the cosmic circumstances and mythological deities and dragons and tigers. But UKGK takes place like on the ground in the mundane world. So there's like a scene within A Tiger's Tale volume 2 in specific where they kind of look down onto the mortal world, the mundane world, and they're like, wow, there's problems going on down there. We should fix things. And then they go off to have their big epic, mythological adventure. And that's what A Tiger's Tale is. But so UKGK is like the on the ground reporting of how bad things are at that time. Hell has broken loose. Monsters are everywhere, and they need a special kind of hero to save them. And so they end up with the Undead KungFu Ghost Killer. So you can just read UKGK and it'll stand alone as its own story. But if you want to kind of see how that whole world fits together, you can get the catch-up kit either digitally in a series of that's like more than 200 pages of
Wow.
comics
Yeah.
and PDF files, or you can get them for real. And I still have copies of volume 1 and volume 2, as well as some pin-ups, and I have a map so you can kind of see where things are. So if they want the catch-up kit, they could just get the entire, saga in one box.
Wow. Okay. I mean, you also have some add-ons too. You have some comic cards, Tiger's Tail 1/2.
Yeah, so Tiger's Tail 1/2 was a comic that I produced in conjunction with an art gallery show that I did where they featured the original art for the comic. And so I had like some pages from the story printed out and collected. But the story has changed so much since that it's almost its own different story, separate from the main series.
Right.
And then the comic cards, Barney, I just sent to press. This is breaking news, but I just sent a whole line of comic cards to the printer. So
Oh, cool.
it's just been something that I discovered, and people love it, where it's just a single comic on a postcard, and so if they don't want to commit to having to spend $15, $20, or whatever, they can just throw down $5 and still get something sent to them. The card comes in the mail, it comes in a protective sleeve, so that you can decide if you want to put it on your wall or if you want to send it to somebody else. And
Wow.
so
Okay. That's
just
cool.
because, I like stuff, and it's just a fun thing to have these little cards. And once again, they're research, and they explore, little bits of martial arts folklore in small, digestible, single page comics.
Right. Now, so as you mentioned too, is that if people go, what I love the fact that like the site for your Kickstarter site is ukgk.site. You type that in and it goes straight to the Kickstarter.
Yes, I wanted to make it super easy and make it kind of fun, like once Barney, it took me a little while to kind of figure out the cadence of being able to pronounce UKGK and not get confused. For a while there, I had to think, okay, Undead KungFu Ghost Killer. But when you see it on a t-shirt, you'll get it. It looks cool, the letters.
Now, so Patrick, remind people, if they want to learn more about your work, where can they go to?
If they want to know more about me, my work as an artist, you can visit plugoarts.com. And so this is my artist site. This is where I curate my comics and my illustration work. I just got commissioned to do a new album cover this year, Barney, so I'm excited about that.
Oh, cool.
And then but yeah, I like to post the various comics that I've worked on. Some of them are from anthologies. Some of those pages are from A Tiger's Tale and from the other projects that I've worked on. I'll have 3 books coming out this year, not even including UKGK. So I'm kind of excited about the amount of comics that I'm getting out into the world.
Right.
But then the most fun thing, the thing that I really love the most about plugoarts.com, especially since I've had that, Barney, I've had that website since about 2008. That you should have seen what it looked like back then. But I have a newsletter where I give people free comics sent straight to their inbox.
Oh, that's cool.
So along with updates and appearances, and maybe I'll have an interview or an essay. But like clockwork, on the second Tuesday of the month, I'll drop a new comic for them to check out. And here you have it, Zong Q in 2020. This was my first little experiment with the character that would become the Undead KungFu Ghost Killer.
I am a fan of Lucy Velaz. I have that too.
Oh yeah, I would love to come back to producing more sci-fi princess stories.
Right. Yeah. Well, this is once again, Patrick, great, fantastic talking to you. It's always been a pleasure. And I look forward to having you come back on. We got to do this. We got to do this more often.
I love to chat. The thing, Barney, is that I love chatting with you, and I just am so glad that so much of our conversation today had nothing to do with the actual project I'm here to promote. We talked about tea, we talked about kung fu movies, like that's why I always look forward. That's why I'm so glad that I was able to rally to meet you for this session today, just
exciting, and yeah, and so those unedited conversations that we have are exclusive to the Storycomic Patreon members, so they get all the good stuff like that. So
yeah, the deep cuts and the movie references, all of it. But yeah, we're talking kung fu comics, so how could I not say something like a deep cut?
See, exactly. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Patrick.
Barney, thank you.